DEA has seen the number of investigations against CJNG more than double over the last couple of years.
$1.1 billion. That's how much the Mexican government seized from the Jalisco Cartel in 2020. In 2015, it was the mafia's turn for a loss. The Italian government seized 2 billion euros in bank deposits, 3,000 companies, and 12,000 properties from them before realizing they had bitten off more than they could chew. In their words, it was more difficult to manage the property seized from the mafia than it was to confiscate it. And that's because crime is a business, and some of the most profitable businesses in the world are also the most ruthless. So what are the 10 richest criminal organizations in the world, you ask? Let's dive in. I bet you didn't expect to see the Taliban on this list, but I'm sure you already know that the Taliban is a notorious criminal organization. Founded in September 1994 by the elusive Mullah Mohammed Omar and 50 of his students, the Taliban grew to become a real problem in Afghanistan. The Taliban have attacked the Afghan government several times, losing and winning the Afghan territory from the US. Now they rule Afghanistan and have imposed their extremist ideals on the terrified communities. But those who have suffered the most have been the women and girls. The Taliban have blocked them from exercising their fundamental rights to expression, movement, and education, and have also denied their basic rights to life, livelihood, healthcare, food, and water.
I feel like a prisoner. Nothing is in my own hands anymore. Before, I could do whatever I wanted.
The Taliban regime is all male, and there simply is no room for females. In their distorted view, the only thing a woman should do is bring more sons into the world so they can be groomed into extremist Talibans.
Boy is power of a family. He can fight.
The Taliban's reign of terror seems far away from ever coming to an end, and this is because it's run like a very profitable business. Whenever they seize a territory, the first point of call is looking for how they can convert the manpower of the population under their control and the resources they have stolen into more wealth. Quite ironically, the Taliban's primary source of income comes from the production and trade of illegal substances, mainly opium and heroin.
The drive through Kabul reveals more drug users and street children than we've seen before. Food prices are soaring. More than half of the population is hungry.
But of course, the Taliban take no responsibility for this. When they're asked why the country is in such a bad way since they took charge, they blamed NATO and the US, which provided a justification for their coup d'etat.
For 20 years, America and its NATO allies killed us with bombs and artillery. Now they're trying to kill us like this. They are responsible for this. The hunger crisis is on them.
The Taliban don't have anyone's interest at heart but their own, and their main interest is making money in every illegal way possible. They also get tens of millions from the illegal mining of natural resources within the regions under their control, collecting ransom for hostages and donations. But it gets deeper. The Taliban relies on the substance networks created and refined by the cartels of Mexico, and today, they've been able to make Afghanistan the biggest heroin growers and producers in the world. In fact, more opium is grown in Afghanistan than there are farms of coca in all of Latin America. And the result of this is that the Taliban is worth a staggering $800 million by Forbes estimates. And yet, they have the audacity to claim that this is what the Afghan people want.
We built the kind of state our nation wants. Our nation fought for Islamic rule for 43 years, and now we want to enforce it.
Yeah, I'm sure most people don't want extremist rulers who shoot at young women who are asking the state for the right to education.
I have lost myself since the Taliban returned to power. I'm no longer the girl I used to be. In the past, I would feel proud looking at myself.
Over the past decades, the Sinaloa Cartel has grown to become one of the most influential drug organizations in the world. In the drug trade, there is hardly any cartel that has the presence, the exploits, or the bank that the Sinaloa Cartel has. But in 2016, DEA dealt a huge blow to the cartel.
Mexican drug king Joaquin El Chapo Guzman convicted on all counts. ABC News obtaining this video, El Chapo, and the moment he learned where authorities were taking him, that was the moment he was actually brought here to the U.S. to face justice.
El Chapo had been arrested and escaped from prison twice before, but in 2016, he was captured in Mexico for the third and final time. A year later, he was extradited to the United States and sentenced to life in prison at the ADX Florence, the country's highest security federal prison. El Chapo won't be able to conduct any business from prison, and it's very unlikely he'll ever walk out. But even so, the Sinaloa Cartel remains relevant and profitable. In fact, the Sinaloa Cartel's profits and power have grown since El Chapo's arrest. How is this possible?
Judy, they are known as Los Chapitos, the four most trusted sons of the world's most notorious drug kingpin. As the I-Team has reported for several years, federal drug investigators here in Chicago consider El Chapo's sons in charge of the Sinaloa Cartel that remains this area's largest trafficker of heroin and methamphetamines.
That's right. El Chapo is believed to have over a dozen children, and his four eldest sons took charge of the Sinaloa Cartel after his arrest. Another faction of the cartel is led by the elusive El Mayo, El Chapo's former friend and work buddy from the Guadalajara cartel. But it's El Chapo's sons who built state-of-the-art labs, expanded smuggling routes, and found new ways to bring narcotics into the U.S. Today, Sinaloa controls 60% of drug revenue globally, and Fortune magazine says the cartel's revenue sits at $3 billion annually. But this is where things get tricky. No one can tell for sure just how much the cartel truly makes. When El Chapo was captured, the cartel suffered some losses and lost hundreds of millions worth of merchandise and distribution routes, but they recovered well enough to still remain at the top of the drug business pyramid. According to El Chapo, El Mayo himself is worth billions. Or perhaps he just says that so the DEA hunts him down and scratches off El Chapo's $12 billion debt. So depending on who you ask, the Sinaloa cartel can be worth as much as $6.5 billion and as unbelievably high as $500 billion. But since we can't accurately measure their net worth, we'll stick with the official estimate of $3 billion. In 2005, this man was the acting head of the family's clan under the Kimura in Naples, Italy. He kidnapped, tortured, and burnt alive the former girlfriend of a rival as he tried and failed to get his location from her. This is not even the breadth of the Kimura's brutality. And yet, despite how much the government has cracked down on the organization, they still exist today. Not only do they exist, but the Kimura is one of the most efficient and one of the most profitable surviving mafia organizations. How profitable? Fortune magazine estimates that the criminal group rakes in an estimated average of around $4.9 billion annually. And all of this is gotten from exploitation, firearms trafficking, narcotics peddling, gambling, and extortion of the most violent kind. In the Kimura Mafia, violence is glorified. They're young soldiers who die robbing, threatening people, or in police shootouts, are given murals and even shrines.
The Kimura organized crime syndicate glorifies their young recruits, almost like saints.
To put up a picture of the robber or to worship a clan boss like a saint, that sends a bad message.
One of the most amazing qualities of the Kimura is the fact that they do not have a centralized management system. Unlike the pyramid-like structure of the Sicilian Mafia, where everyone knows who the Godfather is, the Kimura is made of several individual clans that have bosses and operate with hundreds of affiliates. It's no wonder why they have been in existence since the 17th century, and this is how they managed to invade every single type of business in Naples.
De cada euro que se gasta un napolitano diariamente, 20 céntimos van de una forma directa o indirectamente a la camorra.
200,000 people work for the Kimura, and many of them do so unwillingly.
Tú a veces prefieres pagar el impuesto de seguridad para que mi local no arda por la noche, para que mi local no lo vuelen por la noche.
Most people know them as the Yakuza, but the Yakuza is an umbrella term for criminal organizations that exist within Japan. And of the lot, the Yamaguchi-gumi is the largest. And they aren't just large, they are also thoroughly organized, incredibly influential, and ruthlessly disciplined. Founded in 1915 by the tenured criminal named Harakichi Yamaguchi, Yamaguchi-gumi would pick up a century's worth of violence.
昔はね、やはり暴力的で、私は刑務所5回行きましたよ。5回、通算で14、15年行ったかな。
Did you ever use any guns?
私持ったことありますよ。で、抗争事件、バンバンバン、行ったこともあるよ。
And that violence is not exclusive to outsiders. If you mess up as a member, you're required to chop off your fingers or ear in a ritual of atonement called yubitsumi that reaffirms your loyalty to the codes and ethics of the gang.
これ指もね、下手打って飛ばす指と、また男気出して飛ばす指と2通りあるんですよ。私は男気出してこの指飛ばしましたよ。
Apart from chopping off your pinky finger, You have to get your whole body tattooed with extremely painful, manual needles, nothing like a modern-day tattoo salon. The Mafia and Yakuza share a lot in common. On one hand, the Yakuza actively involves themselves in dispute resolutions that often leave them richer, and they're also known for their heavy involvement and control of the gambling sector and drug trafficking in Japan. And when it comes to their structure, they also piece themselves together like the American Mafia. Familial relations bond together in elaborate hierarchies, where the initiated give up their past life completely and adopt their new one. Now make no mistake, the Yakuza is just as old as the American Mafia, and the Yakuza has existed for hundreds of years, and that's part of why today they are worth a staggering $6.6 billion. But stricter laws have generated a steep decline in Yamaguchi and Yakuza members over the last decade.
Yakuza now can't collect money from people, they can't get a phone, they can't get a hotel room.
Much like any other organized crime member, the Yamaguchi-gumi are always paranoid, afraid they'll be arrested or killed by rivals.
命の危険は感じるけど、守らなあかんもんは守らなあかんからね。自分らが思ってる分、信じて進んでる道を進むためには、危険は仕方がないとは思う。
Have you ever heard of D Company? If the answer is no, then Dawood, the founder of the Indian terrorist unit, would be pleased. Because the billionaire criminal has been a pain in the backside of the Indian state for more than 3 decades, and yet no one has been able to nab him or bring down his multi-billion-dollar organization. According to some sources, Dawood was once 3rd on the FBI's most wanted list and has been blamed for several terrorist attacks as well as actively supporting ISIS. But it doesn't even end there. Dawood's company, or D Company, which he started in the 1970s, ships an ungodly amount of heroin and opium. And today, this criminal organization makes at least $6.7 billion annually. But forget about the money for a minute. The truth is this, no one knows how much Dawood's company is truly worth. They aren't sure just how he makes his money, and they don't even know where he is. Ever since he masterminded the 1993 Mumbai bomb blast, the Interpol, CIA, and the FBI have tried and failed to locate him. And the only reason they have estimates of his wealth is because of the businesses they were able to track. Dawood might never be caught, and his true wealth might never come to light. The Solonskaya Brotherhood, or Brotherhood, was born in the USSR in the 1980s, but after the fall of the Soviet Union, it was even easier for organized crime to prosper in the chaos of changing governments. So the Solonskaya Brotherhood only grew larger. Its founder, Sergei Mikhailov, met his first foot soldiers in the Russian gulags, ultimate hellholes founded by the communist dictator Joseph Stalin. Anyone could be sent to the gulag, from criminals to innocent people who disagreed with the regime. There, they would starve, freeze to death, or be tortured and killed. Mikhailov recruited the worst, most violent people he could find, and as time passed by, they recruited others, and so on. With time, they expanded and became more organized, operating territories that stretched from Russia to major parts of Europe, North America, and even Africa. The Solonskaya Brotherhood's crimes are the worst: human trafficking, prostitution, murder, including contract killings, and huge international swindles. According to the Daily Record, they even expanded their business to art theft, money laundering, arms dealing, and trading nuclear material. But its bread and butter are human trafficking and the heroin trade. Shockingly, Russia consumes 12% of the world's heroin, while it comprises only 0.5% of the world's population. Their structure is highly decentralized. The organization is made up of 10 separate semi-autonomous brigades that more or less operate independently of each other. However, they have mutual respect for one another, and they will unite forces and resources if they encounter threats that surpass an individual brigade's capacity. Their combined revenue is $8.5 billion, according to Fortune magazine. But this is not the end of it. What makes them especially dangerous is the fact that they are now on a level where they can influence the Russian state for their own benefit. And they've been able to do this by reinvesting ill-gained wealth into legitimate businesses like casinos, financial institutions, and even an international airport in Russia called Vnukovo Airport. By 1990, they got even more sophisticated and began moving their blood money through banks, and this allowed them to get close to the Russian oligarchs, who are quite frankly not too different from career criminals themselves. At the very top of the food chain, the Russian Mafia is run by a 12-person council and routinely convenes to assess their organization. And today, they are 9,000 members strong. Their wealth is just the tip of the iceberg. It's truly scary to think about what lies under the water's surface, all the crimes, suffering, and dark influences the Solonskaya Brotherhood has on Russian politics. In March of 2014, a 4-year-old boy was shot dead, along with his mother and her boyfriend, near the southern city of Toronto in a suspected mob hit. The event was so shocking that Pope Francis spoke up against the mafia. But that's a small price to pay to become a member of the Sicilian Mafia, otherwise known as the Cosa Nostra. Many would literally kill to be members of the organization. And that's because Cosa Nostra is beyond just a criminal organization. It is a religion, a way of life. It is a life or death for every one of its members. The group had its humble origins in the 1800s in Sicily, Italy. Legend has it that it started as a prison gang that had a semblance of the same structure and values that the modern-day mafia still has. After years of refining and social climbing, they began to work hand-in-hand with oppressive governments, carrying several questionable assignments for the corrupt government officials. Eventually, they were forced to expand to the US and Europe when totalitarian governments took power. Today, they oversee a vast network of gambling, extortion, money laundering, human trafficking, and many others. Now, if you're wondering how much they're worth, it's somewhere in the region of $7 billion. Number 2, Gulf Cartel. Founded by Juan Nepomuceno Guerrera in the 1930s. The Gulf Cartel is one of the oldest and one of the most ruthless cartels in the world. From their domestic base in Mexico, they run international distribution networks into many parts of Europe and North America. However, their ruthlessness is what has made them survive for so long. Getting kidnapped by the cartel is often worse than a death sentence for a variety of reasons, but most likely because you're likely to disappear without a trace. This is what happened to the Cazares family in the 2011 Matamoros mass kidnapping. Despite the intervention of practically every law enforcement agency in the world, 5 men from the family are still missing to this day. The Gulf Cartel also has an affinity for every form of crime. Maybe it's because they have been around for so long, and maybe it's because law enforcement agencies have tried and failed to bring them down. Over the years, they have amassed a staggering amount of wealth that, according to most sources, is north of $10 billion. Out of all the cartels, they have suffered the most at the hands of anti-drug agencies, and yet they have survived. And it's a testament to not only their longevity, but their ability to remain profitable as an organization of crime. Founded by Juan Nepomuceno Guerrera in the 1930s, the Gulf Cartel is one of the oldest and one of the most ruthless cartels in the world. From their domestic base in Mexico, they run international distribution networks into many parts of Europe and North America. However, their ruthlessness is what made them survive so long. Getting kidnapped by the cartel is often worse than a death sentence for a variety of reasons. First of all, when a cartel kidnaps someone, they'll most likely torture their victim and keep them alive for days before they actually take their life. Then, cartels will dispose of the body so well that most victims are never found or identified, so there's little closure for their grieving families. This is what happened to 10 families in a 2011 mass kidnapping. On July 9, 2011, sicarios from the Gulf Cartel kidnapped 18 members of the Cazares family from 3 different households in Matamoros, Tamaulipas, Mexico. Three days later, they released the women and children, but kept the 5 men. Despite the intervention of practically every major law enforcement agency in the country, the men are still missing to this day. And to think the women and children would have been in the same situation if the cartel hadn't released them willingly. The Gulf Cartel also has an affinity for every form of crime. Maybe it's because they've been around for so long, and maybe it's because law enforcement agencies have tried and failed to bring them down. Over the years, they've amassed a staggering amount of wealth that, according to most sources, is north of $10 billion. Out of all the cartels, including the Sinaloa, they have suffered the most at the hands of anti-drug agencies, and yet they have survived, and it's a testament not only to their longevity, but their ability to remain profitable as an organization of crime. In September 2022, former Gulf Cartel kingpin Jorge Castilla Sanchez was arrested by the DEA and sentenced to life in prison. But the authorities will have to catch a myriad of other people if they want to reduce the mighty Gulf Cartel to ashes. The second largest mafia organization in the world is the 'Ndrangheta. They were the first to get in bed with South America's cocaine dealers in the 1980s, and the result? Well, today they control much of the transatlantic market distribution channels into Europe.
They are big and powerful. We profile in this piece an incredible anti-mafia prosecutor named Nicola Gratteri, who told us he believes that they are the most powerful mafia in the world.
In the past, they were integral to the rise of the infamous yet legendary New York crime families, and their presence is still felt in the US. So how much are they worth?
To give you an idea, the estimated annual revenue of this organization is upwards of over $50 billion.
That's the revenue of Starbucks and McDonald's combined. And while it seems staggering, it's justified because the Calabria-based organization is more than 2 centuries in the making. Now, beyond their drug empire in Europe, the 'Ndrangheta has sustained a reputation as ultimate peacemakers in conflicts. They have been known to organize meetings between warring factions and with other criminal organizations. It was this quality that led them to forge alliances with cartels in the 20th century and subsequently take control of Europe's drug scene. Make no mistake, the 'Ndrangheta is not a mob of peaceful hippies. They can be deadly when they want to, but they know how and when to use diplomacy to get what they want. Here's an interesting twist. Most of the 'Ndrangheta live in hiding, often in unkept, makeshift shelters, far away from the rich mobster luxury villa we tend to imagine.
Covered in earth, it blended into the side of the mountain.
And you can see he went to the extent of bringing out furniture. There's a little cabinet there, a sink.
Apparently, the explanation for this is the very credo of the mafia.
This is another characteristic of the 'Ndrangheta. If you go in Calabria, you don't see places that show the wealthy of a mobster. Once I asked to a former mobster, how can you live that kind of life underground? And the answer was, yes, I was living like a mouse, like a rat, but I was capable to appoint the person of power in an important position. Money comes and goes, but power, it's the ultimate goal.
And when the COVID-19 pandemic hit everyone around the globe, the 'Ndrangheta mafia only got richer.
They have gone in and they have bought failing businesses, whether restaurants or hotels. In some cases, they've gone in and acted as sort of local banks. If you're struggling and you're running some mom and pop business or hotel and you need a little loan, well, the 'Ndrangheta is there.
This is the sad reality of organized crime. The richer they get, the more business they invest in, and so they expand their network, growing even richer and control more people. It's a dark roller coaster that can only be stopped with the same kind of ruthlessness and brutality that they exercise. The Chinese Triads are at the very top of the organized crime food chain. As an organization, this criminal enterprise has existed longer than many can trace, and it's without a doubt older than all of the other criminal organizations on this list. They've existed for hundreds of years and involved in a host of criminal activities from trafficking to loan sharking, prostitution, gambling, and human smuggling. The Triads are extremely well organized. Their structure follows numeric codes that determine someone's rank inside the mafia. The Mountain Master, or the Dragon Head, is the Triad's leader, while the Red Hole is the enforcer and the White Paper Fan is the administrator. Then there are the 49ers, all the lower-ranking members, and the Blue Lanterns, the Triad's uninitiated members. When someone gets initiated into the Triads, after a lengthy, cumbersome process, they recite a 200-year-old oath inspired by the god of war, Guan Yu, while passing beneath an arch made of swords. This is part of their oath. If a member of the society finds himself in difficulty, I will rush to his aid. If I, as a future member of this association, break this oath, the swords will descend and kill me. This might sound cool and honorable, but it's also a sign of just how violent, creepy and bloodthirsty organized crime groups really are. One of the things that many Chinese people living in poverty dream of is moving to the United States, where even the minimum wage is much higher than what they earn back home. Enter the Triads. For $40,000, you get shoved into a 10 by 40 foot container, together with dozens of others, and just a little food and a bucket to urinate in. In 2 weeks, if you survive, you're in California. But many of these desperate people don't have $40,000, so they sign a debt, oftentimes a lifelong debt, to the Triads, working to make money to pay the Triads long before they can send their money back home to their loved ones. The Triads don't care for these people or their future. They hold them prisoners with debt, all while convincing many others to take the same path. Meanwhile, the Chinese Triads get filthy rich.
By bringing 10 or 20 or 30 Chinese into the United States at, approximately $40,000 per person, that's a significant profit margin.
U.S. officials estimated a staggering 100,000 illegal Chinese immigrants being smuggled into the country every single year. This means that the Chinese Triads make $4 billion each year just from smuggling people into the U.S., and they don't just dabble in human smuggling. But as a member of the Triads, you can get rich in virtually any illegal way you can imagine. Whether you want to extort a fish market, run a sketchy casino, beat up clients who owe money, or run rings, the choice is yours. Then there's the Golden Triangle. Myanmar, Laos, and Thailand are responsible for producing most of the world's heroin. Then, the Chinese Triads go on to refine it and sell it all across the globe. Remember the $4 billion the Triads make each year from smuggling people? Well, it's estimated they make another $200 billion just from smuggling heroin. One of the major reasons why it's so difficult to disband the Triad is because, like the Russian Mafia and the Kimura, this organization runs a decentralized structure, and they are incredibly secretive. So secretive that most of the operations still remain a mystery to this day. Over the years, the ones we know have extended across every continent on the globe, and they have participated in activities that are too graphic to show or even state here. Just know that every individual that goes missing, there's a high chance that the Triad had a hand in it. This is the dark reality of organized crime groups. And the truth is, we don't even know the true extent of their crimes or earnings, as they depend on secrecy to keep their business profitable and avoid justice. Hey, thanks for watching. What do you think about this list? Did we miss any super rich criminal organizations? Let us know in the comments section, and before you go, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time.